Hey guys, tonight we're setting sail on warm salt air, creaking timbers beneath your feet, and the stink of unwashed sailors all around. You're aboard a creaky sloop in the Caribbean, sometime in the early 1700s, surrounded by the lurching chaos of pirate life. The sky glows with the dusky gold of a tropical evening, and every shadow could hold danger. A parrot squawks somewhere above. A cannonball just rolled across the deck. And you're not supposed to be here, because you're a woman, and according to every law and superstition of the day, women aboard ships bring nothing but bad luck, and possibly hurricanes. But you've cut your hair, bound your chest, and tightened your voice into something hoarse and boyish. The disguise works. Well, it mostly works. No one's called you out yet. But the longer you stay on board, the more the tension coils around your ribs like damp rope. You'll have to be twice as bold, twice as brutal, and 3 times as quiet just to survive this world. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch near the bow as the sun melts into the sea, pretending to check a coil of rope. Around you, the crew of the Revenge, not the most original name, but it gets the point across, laughs and bickers in at least 4 languages. They're a hodgepodge of ex-soldiers, escaped slaves, broke sailors, and one very loud guy named Fergus who insists he once wrestled a bear. You don't ask follow-up questions. The less people know about you, the safer you are. Still, you've started noticing things. A couple of them stare too long when you bend over a barrel. Someone accidentally brushed your shoulder during mess. And at night, you sleep with a blade tucked beneath your thin mattress. One eye open. Always, there's a strange double standard in pirate life. On paper, it's the most lawless job imaginable. Everyone is equal, nobody cares where you're from, and rules are made by consensus. But when it comes to women, things get complicated. Some pirates did allow women on board, especially in the later 1600s and early 1700s. And some women made entire careers at sea, famously fierce and fabulously armed. But plenty of ships had strict rules against it. Often written into their pirate codes, yes, actual codes, often agreed upon and signed. In some, women weren't just banned. Having one on board was punishable by death. Historians still argue whether that rule was superstition, practicality, or both. Was it fear of romantic drama and jealous brawls? Or the lingering ghost of ancient naval curses, where women were blamed for shipwrecks and storms? Either way, you're walking a tightrope made of rigging. The quartermaster, who, in this egalitarian mess, outranks the captain when it comes to discipline, calls for a meeting. Everyone gathers on the main deck. You slip into the crowd, heart thudding. He announces a prize ship on the horizon. Just ripe for plunder. A merchant vessel with a sluggish hull and plenty of cargo, if the lookout is right, but then, almost as an afterthought, he eyes you. The new one. You didn't give us a name. A few dozen faces swivel toward you. The moment stretches. You clear your throat and rasp, Tom. A beat, Tom what? You consider your options. Then shrug. Just Tom. There's a flicker of a laugh, a ripple of muttered amusement. Someone calls, well, we've got Fancy Dan and Noseless Pete, might as well have just Tom. The tension breaks. The quartermaster grunts approval. For now, you're in. That night, you eat hardtack and beans beside a woman with a long scar down her arm. She wears a man's jacket and a woman's earrings. You'd guess she's Spanish, maybe Portuguese, but her accent shifts depending on who she's talking to. She doesn't press you for your story, and in return, you don't press for hers. There's an unspoken rule aboard pirate ships: privacy is currency, in the dark, she leans closer. They'll figure it out eventually. You know that. You freeze, she smiles. I did, too. Years ago. But I killed the first one who figured me out. After that, no one mentioned it. You glance at the blade in her boot, she adds, softly, don't wait too long to decide what you'll do. When they come for you, they come fast. You lie awake that night listening to the creak of the hull and the sigh of the sea. You've heard stories, most of them grim. Women who were found out and thrown overboard. Or worse. But you've also heard whispers about Bonnie and Mary Red, two of the most famous female pirates in history. Both sailed under Calico Jack, both dressed as men, both fought like lions, and both were eventually caught, but that's a story for later. Right now, your own tale is just beginning, and already, there are cracks in the mask. A split second too long in the way you dodge a question. The flash of recognition in someone's eyes when you stretch a little too gracefully. You catch one sailor digging through your hammock ropes when you're on deck, you move your sleeping spot. One night, during a raid, you charge a merchant guard with a cutlass and shout yourself hoarse. You win the fight, barely. The crew cheers. But that cheer comes with extra glances, too many teeth. One man grabs your shoulder with a little too much curiosity. You fight light, he says, you smile, steady as possible. Faster that way. Still, the pressure builds. There's a kind of bitter humor in it, how you signed up for a life of piracy thinking you'd escape the rigid rules of the mainland, only to find yourself entangled in a new code, one with even harsher punishments. The open sea doesn't care who you are, but the men aboard this ship very much do. You wonder, sometimes, what would happen if you dropped the act. If you showed up one morning in a skirt and said, surprise. Would they throw you overboard? Would anyone defend you? Or would they laugh and pass around bets on how long you'd last? Maybe none of them would care. Maybe all of them would. Historians still argue whether female pirates were truly rare, or just erased by the records. After all, the same chroniclers who complained about the evils of piracy weren't exactly eager to admit that some of the most successful swashbucklers had curves and corsets. For every Bonnie who made it into the books, there were probably dozens who didn't. You drift into uneasy sleep one night with the scent of tar and oranges in the air. Your dreams are full of rope and water and laughter you don't trust. You wake up with a knife beneath your cheek and a secret clutched tight inside your ribs. Out here, being a pirate is dangerous. Being a woman pirate? That's a whole different storm. You wake before dawn, throat scratchy and hair matted to your neck with salt and sweat. The Revenge rocks gently under you, the sails whispering overhead in the early breeze. Around you, the crew begins to stir, groaning, spitting, arguing over whose turn it is to swab the deck. You sit up and stretch, careful not to wince too hard from yesterday's bruises. Today, you'll try to stay invisible. That plan usually lasts about 12 minutes. The pirate routine, despite its romantic reputation, is mostly just work. Hard, endless, blistering work. You scrub, patch, haul, stitch, and mend. You climb rigging under the sun until your skin feels boiled. You check powder levels and count shot. You gather wood for the cook fire and try not to gag when Fergus dumps a bucket of eel stew into your lap and calls it breakfast. You pull your weight twice over because you know if anyone starts whispering that just Tom isn't pulling their share, your whole secret unravels faster than a rotten sail. Still, you're not the only one with something to hide. The Spanish woman, her name is Inez, you've learned, teaches you how to keep your shoulders square even when you're scared. How to shout orders with your chin lifted, even if you're just shouting nonsense. She teaches you how to shoot a flintlock pistol, which jams 3 out of 5 times, but looks intimidating when tucked into your belt. You learn how to pass, not just as a man, but as a pirate man. Brash. A bit smelly. Equal parts lazy and murderous. You grunt instead of greeting. You spit before lying. You sharpen your cutlass in full view. One night, she mutters, being loud protects you. Just never be loud first. That's when they notice. And so you do what the others do, but better. Louder. Colder. Less hesitant. It becomes its own kind of mask, so much so that when you catch your reflection in a silver serving tray from a recent raid, you don't quite recognize yourself. There's something in your eyes. Not fear exactly. More like calculation. The odd thing is, pirate ships, for all their violence, can be weirdly democratic. Crews often elect their captain. Loot is shared according to agreed-upon rules. Everyone signs the Articles of Agreement, and even the lowest deckhand gets a cut. On paper, at least, this floating murder club is more progressive than most governments at the time, but you learn quickly that equity ends at the gunwale. Once you're suspected of being different, whether it's gender, background, or just not fitting the mold, you're fair game. So you perfect the swagger. You boast about imaginary conquests. You curse with abandon. You spit further than Fergus. Still, things slip. You dodge a brawl one afternoon and the way you twist, too fluid. Too dancer-like, gets noticed. You nurse a cut on your leg and forget to wince like a man. You catch Inez giving you a look, somewhere between warning and admiration. Later, she corners you near the powder magazine. You're good. But you're not careful anymore. You sigh, and for the first time in weeks, let a bit of your voice soften. I'm tired. She nods. You get one mistake. That's all. Choose it wisely. But you're not the only woman on the ship. Not anymore. It starts with a rumor. Whispers among the crew that one of the new recruits, just Tom, maybe, or maybe the quiet cook's assistant, doesn't shave, ever. That their voice rises at odd times. That their body is shaped wrong. It spreads like spilled rum. You're not sure if it's about you or someone else, then a storm hits, a real one. The kind with slate skies and waves like angry mountains. The sails whip and snap. The mast groans. Barrels break free and roll like boulders across the deck. Men scream. One goes overboard, vanishes. You cling to the rigging, lashed in by a wet rope and sheer panic. When the storm breaks, you're all different, exhausted. Soaked. Angry. Alive. The next morning, one of the new crew is missing, not the one who fell, but another. Nobody says her name, but everyone knows. She was found out. Quietly removed. You don't ask where she went. That night, the quartermaster gives a speech, no secrets aboard. We are what we say we are. If you lie, the sea eats you. You don't sleep at all. Some time after, during an idle stretch of calm water and too much sunshine, the ship anchors near a small port. You're told you'll be joining a raiding party into a nearby town. Inez warns you, don't be reckless. Towns see things ships don't. The raid goes sideways, there's screaming. Torches. Shots fired too early. A misstep. A trip, and suddenly. You're pinned beneath a merchant with a dagger at your chest. Your shirt tears, he sees, and then, Inez appears, pistol already smoking. The merchant falls, but he saw, and so did one of your crewmates. The return to the ship is silent. You ride in a jostling rowboat, heart pounding, vision narrowed to the tips of your boots. The air tastes like blood and citrus. That night, there's a meeting. You're hauled in front of the quartermaster, the captain, and half the crew. He gestures to you. Strip. You don't move. He steps forward. Now. You consider running. Consider fighting. But you remember what Inez said. Choose your mistake, so you say, loud and clear, I'm a better sailor than half this crew. A better fighter. I killed 3 men on the last raid. I climbed the mainmast during the storm when Fergus passed out. And if you throw me overboard now, you lose someone who can steer by stars and skin a fish with a spoon. Silence, someone coughs. Someone else mutters, with a spoon. You don't smile, the quartermaster stares. Then, finally, she's earned her share. A ripple of uncertain approval. Some cheers. A few glares. Fergus spits. But no one objects. You've crossed a line, and weirdly, you're still standing. From that moment on, everything shifts, you're no longer just Tom. You're, well, still not quite sure who you are on this ship. But you're visible now. Present. Some avoid you. Some admire you. Some try to flirt, which goes poorly. Inez gives you a half-smile and says, "You're braver than I was." And the ship sails on. Historians still argue whether women like you were tolerated because of sheer competence, or because ships in desperate times will accept anyone who can tie a reef knot and stab a guard in the neck. But for a moment, brief and bright, you belong. Then one morning, you spot a British naval frigate on the horizon, and everything begins to unravel again. The frigate appears just after dawn, a smudge on the horizon that sharpens into a hull and sails as the sun climbs. You spot it before most of the crew, while scrubbing down a rust-stained length of deck, salt still crusted in your hair from the last night's mist. At first, it looks like any other ship. But the silhouette tells you everything: the crisp sails, the broad body built for stability and firepower, the polished brass fittings that glint even at this distance. Royal Navy. And not a small one, you mutter under your breath and call for the quartermaster. Within minutes, the Revenge is awake. The alarm bell clangs. Crew scrambles. Orders fly like arrows. You grab a pistol without checking if it's loaded. Just the feel of it in your hand steadies your breath. The quartermaster scowls toward the oncoming ship. That's no merchant. That's a man-o'-war. Fergus mutters something unrepeatable. Inez stands beside you. They're not here by accident. And you know she's right. The Revenge has drawn too much attention lately. A string of successful raids, a few high-profile victims, and the unfortunate decision to leave a rather mocking flag behind at one port. The Navy was always going to notice. You just didn't expect them today. The captain decides to run. It's not cowardice, it's strategy. The Revenge is smaller and faster, able to slip through coral reefs and sandbars where the heavier man-o'-war can't follow. But running isn't simple. The wind has to be right. The rigging must hold. The helmsman, today, it's you, must steer like their life depends on it. Because it does, cannons boom behind you. Water erupts on your starboard side, splashing the deck and leaving a wet fog behind. You turn the wheel hard, teeth clenched. The ship groans beneath you like an old dog waking up sore. You yell for more sail. The crew obeys. Even now, with capture looming, they trust you. That might be the most surreal part of all. For a little while, you think you might outrun them, but then, another shot. Closer this time. And then the terrible crack of the mast. The Revenge lurches, veering left. A cannonball has hit the topmast, and rigging rains down like angry vines. Sails twist. You try to correct the wheel, but it's no use. The ship lists. The Navy draws closer, cannons primed. You hear one crewman start praying. Another jumps overboard, and then the grappling hooks fly. You reach for your pistol, knowing full well it's too late. The boarding party comes fast, bayonets gleaming, red uniforms soaked with sea spray, faces blank with discipline. You fight, of course. You shoot once, miss. Draw your cutlass. Block, parry, duck. Someone slashes your arm, and the pain is bright and immediate. You keep fighting, but it's no use. within minutes, the deck is theirs. The captain is bleeding from the temple. Fergus is swearing in 3 languages. Inez has vanished, and you're pressed to the deck by a boot, wrists yanked behind you, and shackled in iron still slick from someone else's blood. As the sun rises higher, you're herded below deck into the prison hold, now packed with the captured crew. It smells of seawater and sweat and old gunpowder. You sit with your hands chained to a pipe, arm throbbing. A young soldier brings a rag for the wound. He doesn't meet your eyes. You're not dead. That surprises you, but this is only the beginning. The British Navy doesn't hang pirates at sea. No, they like trials. Public ones. The kind with pamphlets and spectators. You'll be taken to Jamaica, probably, Port Royal or Kingston. There, they'll parade you in front of a judge and pretend you have a chance to defend yourself before inevitably sentencing you to hang. Trials are expensive and slow, but they're good theater. You look around the cell. The others are too dazed to talk. Fergus is nursing a broken nose. The captain stares at the ceiling like he's already halfway to the gallows. Someone whimpers softly in the corner. Inez is not here. You wonder, did she leap overboard during the chaos? Hide below with the powder? Disguise herself as one of the crew again and slip away into the fog? You hope so, but you don't have that luxury. When the Navy searched the Revenge, they found the ledger. You know the one. The list of shares, of who got what cut of each prize. And there, in too perfect script, your name, just Tom. That alone might have saved you, but they also found your clothes, your other clothes, the ones you'd buried in the lining of your sea chest. A linen shift, a ribbon. One stocking. It was foolish, keeping those. But something in you couldn't throw them away. And now, they're evidence. So now, the soldiers don't just see you as a pirate, they see you as a woman pirate, and that complicates everything. The next morning, an officer comes to question you. His uniform is crisp, his accent clipped, and his nose wrinkled like he smells something offensive just by being near you. He flips open a notebook. Name. You hesitate. He raises an eyebrow. You don't want to lie again, do you? You answer slowly, N. You almost say something else, your old surname, but decide against it, and what? Just Anne. He doesn't find that funny. He scribbles something and then flips to a different page. You were found dressed in men's clothing. Carrying weapons. Are you aware that such behavior is illegal? Yes. Your voice is flat. I'm aware. He pauses. Then leans forward, voice lower. Why did you do it? You blink. To eat. He frowns. To live, you clarify. He doesn't write that down. Were you coerced into joining the pirates? No. Were you abducted? No. Are you with child? You look at him. He stares back. You say nothing. He closes the notebook. You'll be processed in Port Royal. And just like that, he's gone. The next few days blur. You're fed twice a day, something brown and something harder than bread. The brig smells worse than before. The man beside you coughs all night. Someone's leg wound festers. You start to dream of clean sheets and oranges. At night, you wonder if they'll try you differently now. Women accused of piracy complicate the justice system. They don't know whether to treat you as violent criminals or wayward girls. The law wasn't exactly built for you. Historians still argue whether female pirates were more likely to be spared out of pity, or punished more harshly to set an example. It varied wildly. Some were hanged without ceremony. Others, like in Bonnie and Mary Red, claimed to be pregnant and received stays of execution. You don't know yet what your defense will be. But you do know this: whatever happens in Port Royal, it won't be justice, it'll be spectacle. You don't see the sun again until you arrive in Port Royal. The chains stay on for the entire journey. Your wrists are chafed, your ankles bruised, and your back aches from the way they packed the prisoners shoulder to shoulder below deck, as though you were sacks of flour. The only breeze comes through two rust-rimmed slits in the hull, and the only change in light is the flicker of lanterns swaying on rusty hooks. At one point, someone gets sick. No one bothers cleaning it up. Port Royal is loud, colorful, alive in the way only a pirate-infested harbor can be. Shouts in every accent, smells of frying fish and horse dung, fabrics drying in the sun and bottles clinking under sailors' coats. You blink against the brightness, trying to keep your face neutral even as the light hits your salt-stung eyes. There are kids running barefoot through the muck, a goat chewing someone's hat, and British soldiers keeping everyone in line with the flat ends of their bayonets. They march you through the streets like a traveling show. People line up to see the pirate captives. Women gasp and clutch their baskets. Children point. Someone throws a peach pit that bounces off Fergus's temple. He swears. The soldiers jab him with a musket and tell him to smile, and then there's you in torn breeches, shirt blood-stiff at the collar, hair matted down and lips cracked. Your boots are mismatched. Your face is dirty. But the whispers ripple anyway, that one's a woman. She fought dressed like that. I heard she slit a man's throat with a spoon. No, she's pregnant, you fool. Serves her right, whatever she gets. You keep walking. They lock you in a stone cell with bars thick enough to hold a bear and one high window that lets in nothing but the occasional mosquito. The court date is set for 2 weeks from now. In the meantime, you're given gruel, water, and one very bored priest who thinks it's his sacred duty to save your soul. Repent, he says, every day. You ask him what for, he says, for murder. You say, so the men will repent too. He hesitates, then he says, not if they don't survive. That about sums it up. Your trial won't be fair. But you already knew that. Pirate trials are never really about the pirates. They're about the message. The show. The illusion of order. Especially when women are involved. The presence of a female pirate in a courtroom disrupts everything the British legal system thinks it knows about crime and sin and who gets to wield a sword. In 1720, and Bonnie and Mary Red were tried in Jamaica, just like this. They were found guilty, just like you probably will be. But they bought themselves time by claiming they were both pregnant. Pleading the belly, they called it. A legal loophole. The law didn't allow for the execution of a woman carrying an unborn child, not out of kindness, but because executing a baby would be a crime against property. The logic was, as usual, twisted. Still, it worked. For a little while, historians still argue whether the courts truly believed them, or just didn't want the scandal of executing visibly pregnant women. Either way, they weren't hanged right away, so now, locked in your damp cell with nothing but fleas and prayers for company, you start to think about options. You could plead guilty, hope for mercy. But you've already heard the judge's reputation. He once sentenced a thief to hang for stealing a bucket. So, no, you could plead the belly. Say you're pregnant. They'd have to delay your sentence. Maybe long enough for someone to sneak you out. Maybe long enough for you to escape on your own. You could tell the truth, that you dressed as a man because you had no other way to survive. That piracy was your only option. But the court doesn't care about survival stories. Not yours, anyway. One morning, a woman enters your cell. She's in a pale yellow dress, gloves buttoned tight, and her hat is pinned so severely to her head that it looks painful. She holds a notebook. No military insignia. No priest's collar. Just quiet authority and a very unimpressed expression. Name. She asks, you sigh. Still just Anne. She doesn't smile. I'm here on behalf of the governor's office. That gets your attention. Your case has attracted interest, she continues, scribbling something. You're unusual. Educated. Possibly literate. Several witnesses noted your conduct during the battle, disciplined, even gallant. I wasn't gallant. I was angry. Same thing, she says dryly. They'd like to make an example of you. But they're still deciding what kind. You eye her. Execution. Possibly. You lean forward. And the other option? She closes the notebook. They're considering offering you clemency. If you cooperate. You snort. Cooperate how? Testify. Publicly. Talk about the horrors of piracy. Become a symbol of redemption. You let that sink in. They want a repentant pirate, you say, slowly. One with a womb and a tearful story. She nods, and if I refuse? She nods again. You sit back against the wall. Later that evening, you try to imagine yourself in a dress again. It's harder than you expect. You can't picture your hands without rope burns or your face without sunburn. You don't know if you can play the part they want. But you know you'll have to do something. Because if you go into that courtroom as yourself, unapologetic, defiant, angry, they'll hang you before the candles burn down. The next day, you make a choice. The guards bring you to the jailer's office, where the woman in yellow waits again. You sit across from her and say, I'll testify. I'll cry if they want. But I want a guarantee. She raises an eyebrow. Which is? No noose. No prison. Just passage out. Somewhere far. She closes her notebook. I'll see what I can do. That's as close to a promise as you'll get, and so you wait. For the trial. For the performance. For your chance to slip through the cracks like water through a loose plank. You know the gallows are still being built. You hear the hammering every night, but you also know something they don't. Pirates may get captured, but not all of them stay that way. That night, you don't sleep, you lie on your back, staring at the cracked ceiling stones above your cot, listening to the scratch of rats in the corners and the soft drip of moisture from the walls. The damp creeps into your bones, but you barely feel it. Your thoughts are louder than the night sounds. You think about the sea, not the sea in books, or in paintings, or in a merchant's dull travel tale. Your sea. The sea that tasted of salt and blood, that slapped you across the face when you climbed the rigging and spat wind into your mouth when you shouted into the storm. You think about the slap of sails catching a sudden gust, the creak of the mast, the deep, thunderous joy of speed. You think about the moment after a raid, when all is still except the breathing of the crew and the slow hush of waves. You'd never felt more alive than you did out there. You whisper, I miss it. The cell doesn't answer. You remember Fergus's grin when you beat him in arm wrestling. You remember old Tom humming when he scrubbed the deck. You remember Eleanor, red-faced and cursing as she stitched up your shoulder with her left hand shaking. You remember how they looked at you, not as a novelty or a warning or a sin, but as a crewmate. Just another soul on the water. You belonged to them, and they to you, and now you're a cautionary tale in the making. A villain in the magistrate's mouth. A curio to be poked and displayed. You turn your face to the wall, but your lips form a promise, soft, defiant, and certain. They won't keep you here forever. It begins with a knock, not the kind of knock you're used to, the sharp, rhythmic signal of an ally at the door of a tavern, or the code tap against a ship's cabin before entering. This one is hesitant, slow. It echoes down the damp corridor of your cell like it doesn't want to be here. The jailer appears moments later, holding a pair of worn leather boots and a corset. Court day, he says, eyes darting anywhere but your face. You blink. It's not the boots that throw you. It's the corset. White, stiff, boned with baleen. The kind of thing you haven't worn since your mother tried to marry you off to a tailor's apprentice when you were 17. You hold it up, incredulous. I'm being tried for piracy, not petticoat theft, you mutter. He shrugs. Orders. So, you lace yourself into the damn thing. The bones bite your ribs. The laces choke your breath. You nearly laugh at the absurdity, forced to dress like a lady so the court can properly convict you of being a man. When they finally haul you into the courtroom, everything smells like candle smoke, stale ink, and sweat. There's a lot of red fabric. Heavy drapes, heavy coats, heavy moods. The magistrate's bench towers at the far end of the room like the stern of a ship, and behind it sits a man whose wig is doing most of the thinking for him. He peers down at you like you're a particularly confusing soup. Name? He demands, you give it. Your real name. Not the one you used aboard ship. Not the alias you gave in the taverns of Port Royal or the harbors of Tortuga. Just you. The courtroom stirs, a woman. A woman pirate. A woman who fought, and sailed, and swore like any man. A woman who boarded ships and leapt from rigging with cutlasses drawn. A woman in court, in a corset, facing judgment. This is not the usual docket. They read the charges: piracy, of course. Theft. Assault. Impersonation. Wearing breeches without license. That last one gets a few confused looks, but it's on the books. Then come the murmurs about insubordination, improper conduct, and perhaps, treasonous femininity. The judge clears his throat. We are not here to debate maritime customs or the eccentricities of clothing. We are here to determine whether this person, and he pauses, like the word is sour, is guilty of piracy upon the high seas. Your mouth twitches. You want to ask if they'll be charging the men for wearing sleeves or using spoons, but you hold your tongue. It becomes quickly apparent that the court doesn't quite know what to do with you. Some of the prosecution seems determined to argue that you were a man, so your crimes fit neatly into the usual punishments. Others insist you must not have been, because piracy is clearly a masculine vice. And you can almost see the heat rise in the courtroom as logic, prejudice, and lace all tangle into one messy knot. They call witnesses: a merchant captain whose ship you helped seize. He points at you and calls you a sea demoness. He says you laughed as your crew raided his cargo hold. He says you tied up his quartermaster with ribbon. That part, you remember. It had been Eleanor's idea. They call the prison doctor next. He looks like he regrets ever being born. She is. Biologically, he says, and stops. Coughs. Fumbles with his papers. A woman. Gasps. Somebody faints. You begin to feel like you're less a defendant and more an exhibit at a particularly judgmental museum. They call one of your crewmates next. It's Fergus. He limps a little, probably still sore from the last brawl, but when he sees you, something shifts in his face. Not fear. Not pity. Just the look of a man remembering every time you had his back when the bullets flew. He's sworn in. They ask if you deceived him. No, he says flatly. Did she pretend to be a man? She didn't pretend anything. She fought like she was ready to die. Same as the rest of us. Was she ever improper? You see him bite the inside of his cheek. She told me to shut up during an argument. If that counts. Laughter bubbles in the court before being smothered by a very scandalized usher. You smile. Just barely. Fergus doesn't meet your eye again. He just steps down and disappears into the gallery, vanishing into the folds of powdered wigs and wide skirts. They call Eleanor next. She walks differently in shackles. Still upright. Still proud. But there's a tightness in her jaw. She looks at you and doesn't look away. Did the defendant ever express unladylike inclinations? The prosecutor sneers. Eleanor blinks. She stabbed a man who called her sweetheart, she says. A pause. Would you say she acted like a man? Eleanor considers. I'd say she acted like a sailor. They dismiss her in frustration. You're next. The bailiff calls your name, as if anyone in the room could have forgotten it by now, and you rise. Your corset pinches. Your boots hurt. You feel the 1,000 eyes on your back as you walk to the center. You feel history breathing down your neck, waiting for you to either apologize or catch fire. The judge leans forward. Do you deny these charges? You shake your head. I sailed. I fought. I stole. I didn't do it in a dress. That's the truth. A murmur. The judge drums his fingers on the bench. Do you regret it? You pause. And this, somehow, is the hardest question of all. You think of the ocean wind in your lungs. The thrill of the chase. The laughter around a fire barrel. The song Eleanor hummed when she thought no one was listening. You think of the blood, yes, but also the freedom. You look the judge in the eye. No, there is silence, not scandalized silence, not shocked silence, just heavy, leaden, tired quiet. The court doesn't know what to make of that answer. Of a woman who doesn't flinch. Who doesn't fold. Who won't apologize for living. The judge clears his throat again. The court will adjourn and deliberate on sentencing. And with that, you're escorted out. Back through the echoing halls, back through the jeers and stares, back to the stone cell where your straw mattress waits. But you're not the same person who woke up this morning. You're no longer the secret in the shadows. No longer the mystery the crew whispered about. No longer the girl in a man's coat or the pirate in a corset. You're known, now, and you don't quite know if that's a curse. Or a kind of freedom. Outside, the wind picks up. Somewhere beyond the city walls, you can just barely hear the sound of gulls. The sea hasn't forgotten you, and you haven't forgotten her. They say the sea is no place for a woman, but you found that the courtroom is far worse. By now, the trial has dragged on long enough that your bones ache from sitting. Your ankles are rubbed raw from irons that were removed only for appearances. You're tired. Not just in the way sleep might fix, but tired in your marrow, from the weight of all their gazes. You had once braced yourself against the roll of a ship, shoulders squared to a storm. Now you're bracing against powdered wigs, stern frowns, and the steady hum of Latin phrases being flung like cannonballs across the room. You're not supposed to understand the terms, but you do. Malefactress. Murderess. Pirate. They spit the words like they're lighting matches. But there's one word they keep avoiding, woman, because now, the trial has taken a turn. They are no longer entirely sure what to do with you. See, it started when the magistrate, old and pink-faced and blinking rapidly, read off your list of alleged crimes. You could have recited it with him, really. Theft, piracy, impersonation, unlawful bearing of arms, violence against His Majesty's officers, and a very specific clause about disguising oneself with intent to deceive in matters of both sex and station. It's that last bit that caused a stir. You're not the first woman to be tried for piracy, no. But you're certainly one of the few who did it well enough to make the papers. And the town is thrilled. They came in crowds, eager to see what such a creature looked like. They expected some wild-eyed beast with a beard glued on and blood dripping from your teeth. Instead, they got. Well, you sit calmly. You speak softly when addressed. You don't spit or shout. You don't curse unless provoked, and even then, your insults are creative. You hold yourself like a sailor, and you've even been caught smiling during the more ridiculous accusations. The crowd is divided. Some whisper that you're possessed. Others claim you're a seductress sent by the devil. One pamphlet declared that you had bewitched the entire crew using ancient charms and female magics. Another praised your pluck and gall, while still managing to say nothing kind about your face. The court is less colorful, but just as confused, and then, one morning, as your fate hangs heavier than ever, you say the words, I plead the belly. The room stills. Even the magistrate's quill pauses in mid-scratch. The clerk blinks. You. What? You repeat it. Calm, steady. I plead the belly. And just like that, the gears of justice grind to a halt, because while they know what to do with pirates, and they certainly know what to do with women. They are utterly unequipped to handle a pregnant pirate woman. Especially one who might hang. Now, to be clear, you're not entirely sure whether you're pregnant. But in the 18th century, pleating the belly isn't about certainty, it's about possibility. It's a legal maneuver, one that women have used for centuries. If you're with child, the court cannot, by law or by Christian conscience, execute you until the baby is born. Sometimes not even then, and so, a jury must be assembled, not a jury of your peers. Not the sort who'd understand salt under your nails or the weight of a cutlass on your hip. No, this jury is a jury of matrons, respectable local women, most of them midwives or mothers many times over, called forth to examine you and determine whether there truly is life stirring in your belly. You are summoned to a separate chamber, stripped, and inspected by women whose eyes are both kind and clinical. They do not look at you with scorn. Some of them are curious. One offers you a scrap of bread after the ordeal, and their verdict, uncertain. They cannot say for sure if you are pregnant, but they cannot say that you are not, and so the court must wait. You are returned to your cell, no longer just a prisoner, but a possible mother. Your jailers are less rough now, though no less distant. You receive extra food, a thicker blanket. One even leaves you a boiled egg without a word, but the kindness is laced with something sour, because the court, the town, the country, they don't quite know what to do with you now. Executing a woman. That's one thing. Executing a mother-to-be. That's a problem. It's a public relations nightmare, even in the age of stocks and scolds bridles. So they wait. And you wait. And in the waiting, rumors bloom like mold in the corners of your cell. Some say you're carrying the devil's child. Others whisper that it's the captain's. That it's a ghost's. That it's no child at all but a cannonball, cursed and curled in your womb. Meanwhile, you let the story grow. You rub your belly when the guards are watching. You wince at imaginary kicks. You ask for warm water at odd hours. It becomes performance, survival through theater. You become both actress and playwright of your own reprieve, and the town is wrapped, pamphlets are printed. Songs are sung. There's even talk of a stage play. You become the pirate belle, a woman who charmed the seas, cut down scoundrels, and now carries the future of England in her belly. No one's quite sure if they want you hanged or knighted. You take quiet pleasure in the absurdity. There's power in being unknowable. You see it on their faces, in the way the guards avoid your eyes now, as if you might cast spells with a glance. In the way the priest hesitates before offering prayers. In the way the magistrate himself begins to stumble when addressing you, as if the law books he once wielded like weapons now read like riddles. They wanted a monster, they got a woman who might make more people, they don't know what that makes you. And so, they wait. And in the waiting, you reclaim something, not freedom, not yet, but space. Time. The right to exist in defiance of what they expected. You are not their story anymore. You are your own interruption. You lie on your cot at night, hands over your belly, and think. Let them wonder. Let them fear what they cannot name. You smile, because for the first time in weeks, you are no longer moving toward the noose, you are standing still, and that, for now, is victory enough. You're not sure what you expected when you finally stepped back into a tavern, not a jail cell, not a courtroom, not a parish workroom full of beetroot broth and shame, but a real tavern, with real people, with real tankards full of real beer. But it wasn't this. There's a kind of hush in this place. Not the silent kind, but the heavy-lidded one. You know the type, where the heat of bodies and the fog of drink flatten the world into soft shadows and murmurs. No loud singing, no chairs flying, no arm-wrestling contests that end in bruises and friendship. Just low talk, a few coughs, and the scrape of a spoon in someone's stew. It's the plow and pipe, or what's left of it. Different barkeep. Different crowd. And none of them, not one, looks up when you enter. That's the first thing that rattles you, The way they keep drinking. The way they don't care. You're used to eyes following you. Admiring, leering, wary, it didn't matter. Attention was a currency you always had plenty of, but here. You're a ghost in a corset, and maybe that's the point, the barkeep doesn't ask your name. Just tilts a chin and says, if you're not paying, you're not staying. So you drop the silver coin you pinched from your escort's belt and find a stool, it's sticky. The wood's warped from years of spilled ale and elbows. The air smells like yeast, sweat, and boiled cabbage. You breathe it in like a relic. You know this place. Not this specific room, maybe. But this kind of place. You've lived 100 nights like this, cheeks flushed with drink, voices rising and falling like waves on a tide. All of you clinging to the edge of something unspoken, heartbreak, boredom, survival, whatever kept your feet from walking into the sea. This time, though, the tide's gone out. There's an old man hunched in the corner, spooning mash into his mouth without meeting anyone's eyes. A pair of washerwomen share a mug of cider between them, knuckles scraped, aprons flecked with lye. A chimney sweep, not yet 14, licks the dregs from the bottom of a tankard. You remember being that small once. That hungry. This isn't a gathering. It's a retreat. You take a sip of your drink, it's thin and warm, but it's beer. It'll do. You set it down and listen. One man mutters about the miller cheating weights again. Another groans about the harvest. A woman laughs once, sharp and bitter, when someone says something about taxes. No one's celebrating. They're here for the drink, not the stories. Not the music, not even the company, and you begin to understand, in your memory, a tavern was an act of defiance. A place where the poor came to play at being kings and queens for an evening, crowns made of froth and lies. But now. This is something else. This is a refuge. A place where people come not to rise above their stations, but to disappear beneath them. To vanish for a few hours into the haze of beer and the dull weight of their own fatigue. You feel oddly respectful of that. You also feel thirsty, so you sip again. Across the room, a man coughs until he retches, and no one blinks. Someone lights a clay pipe. The smoke curls like a lazy thought. You lean back, close your eyes, and try to find the music in all of it. It's there, faint and tired, the soft harmony of the desperate. You remember a song from your ship. A lullaby for the drunk, sung by Eleanor in a voice like honey stirred with gravel. Drink, till the sea forgets your name. Drink, till the stars all look the same. Drink, till your wounds are just old tales, and sleep like a boat with silver sails. You hum it under your breath. No one notices. The drink makes your tongue feel slow, but not sleepy. You stay awake, alert in that feral way a fox does when it's pretending not to watch the hens. You're not here for mischief, not tonight. But old habits don't die. They sit on your shoulder and whisper about pockets and escape routes and how easy it would be to vanish out the side door, but you stay, because something's pulling at you. Something in the way these people drink. Not greedily. Not to celebrate or forget. Just to endure. As if the pint is a pact with the night. Let me last one more evening, and I won't ask for anything more. That's not the kind of drinking you were used to. Your kind was louder, messier, braided with laughter and shouting and slaps on the back. This is drinking like prayer. Quiet, weary, and painfully sincere. You try to picture yourself staying here. Not just tonight. For good. Coming back every evening, sitting in the same spot, nodding at the same barkeep, letting your world shrink to one pint and a bowl of broth. Could you do it? Would you survive it? You're not sure. You look down into your tankard. The foam's all gone. There's just flat brown liquid now, and a sliver of your own reflection, warped by the curve of the pewter. You look tired, not just tonight tired, life tired, and still, you raise your drink. Because that's what everyone else is doing. Because that's what this place is for. You clink your tankard against the table, soft, like a secret promise, and take a long, slow sip. It doesn't taste like freedom. It doesn't taste like rebellion. But it tastes like now, and that's enough, at least for tonight. The next sip goes down easier. Not because the beer has improved, but because you've stopped expecting it to. There's a peace in lowered standards, you suppose. You let your hand rest on the tankard, your thumb tracing the worn rim, as if memorizing the texture of ordinariness. Then something shifts, not loudly. Just a door creaking open. A faint gust of air, cooler than the inside, carrying the scent of rain and chimney soot. You don't turn, but your ears prick. So do the ears of a few others, subtle flinches, the way a flock of starlings tilts in wind. A figure steps in. Long coat. Straw-colored hair, limp with sweat. He looks around, not like he's searching, but like he's remembering a dream in pieces. Then he moves to the fire and stands there for a long while with his hand stretched toward it, though it's barely burning. Finally, he sits. He doesn't order a drink. He doesn't speak. Just rests his head in his hands. You know that pose. You've worn that same shape in alleyways and churches and stairwells and stables. The collapse of someone who's used up every last word and still hasn't reached relief. You watch him through the amber lens of your drink. The room watches him too, quietly, gently. No questions. No kindness, either. Just space. And time. That's the strange sort of mercy this place offers. The barmaid, narrow-faced and practical, slides him a cup of small ale without a word. He doesn't look up. Just drinks. Slowly, you let your gaze wander again. There's a new group near the hearth now, 3 men in thick doublets stained with coal dust. Miners, maybe. One of them tells a joke in a low voice. You can't hear it, but the others laugh, not loudly, not cruelly, but the way people do when they're surprised by joy. A startled kind of sound. Like finding warmth in cold sheets. The fire has burned low now, more glow than flame, a circle of coals murmuring their last sleepy secrets. Someone added a damp log, and now a thin trail of smoke wanders up the chimney like it's lost its purpose. You've switched to something darker. Not by choice, exactly. The barmaid gave you that look again, that you've had enough of the light stuff and not enough of the real stuff look, and you didn't argue. This new drink smells like burnt fruit and bad ideas. You drink it anyway. There's a kind of courage in that, you think, the kind that shows up late in the night when the stories start bending around the corners and everyone forgets how much truth was in the original version. The man beside you, Jorik, or maybe Jarek, or maybe something that sounds like that if you slur it, has been talking for a while. You've been listening. Sort of. He's on about some hunting trip where he nearly got trampled by a boar. Or saved a priest from a bear. Or wrestled a wolf to save a goose. The animal keeps changing, and so does the reason. But it doesn't matter. The rhythm is right. His voice is warm and cracked. The cadence of his tale wraps around the room like a quilt made of lies and laughter. You laugh, too, when it's your turn. It feels good. Your shoulders shake a little. Your nose crinkles. You clutch the table edge to stay upright, and for a moment, nothing else matters. Not your cutlass. Not your arrest. Not the courtroom that still smells like powdered wigs and old vengeance. Not even the fact that you don't know where you're sleeping tonight. All that matters is that you are still here. Laughing. Drinking. Existing in this strange, sticky, smoke-swirled place between regret and resilience. Another tale starts up at the far table. A one-eyed man, he claims to be a former ship captain, though his coat says barnacle collector more than admiral, leans forward and begins spinning a yarn about mermaids, taxes, and some sort of duel involving a roasted swan. You missed the first half. But the second half is somehow worse. And better. You drink again, and somehow, it becomes your turn. You don't remember deciding to speak. You don't remember standing. But there you are, one foot braced on the rung of your stool, gesturing wildly with a tankard that threatens to baptize the floor. You tell them about the goat, the one that chased you 3 villages over after you accidentally kicked over its master's still. You tell them about the barge accident involving 3 barrels of mead and a pair of trousers that weren't yours. You tell them about the time you tried to fake being a noblewoman by stuffing lavender in your boots and pronouncing peasants like it had 7 syllables. They laugh. They wheeze. Someone slaps the table so hard their bread falls off, and in that moment, you feel heroic, not in the knight on a horse way. Not in the poet's song way, just in the human way. You failed, fallen, lied, fled, sobbed, stolen, and shouted your way through life, and now here you are, still standing, telling the tale, because that's what humans do, isn't it? We take our chaos and turn it into stories. Into warnings. Into jokes. Into reasons to keep going. You bow, dramatically. Nearly fall over, the applause is enthusiastic. Also mostly from a man who may have mistaken you for someone else, but you'll take it. You sit again, cheeks flushed, heart warm. The fire's nothing now but ash, but the room seems brighter than before. Someone refills your drink. You don't ask what it is. You drink, the tavern pulses with noise now. Spoons tapping tankards. Boots thudding against floorboards. The occasional hiccup punctuating sentences like rogue punctuation marks. A card game has started in the corner. A serious one. They're using buttons and bones for stakes. A rat watches from under the bench, perhaps placing bets of its own. You lean back, stretching your legs. Jorik, or Jarek, leans in and says something about how you remind him of his sister, or maybe his mule, or maybe the ghost that lives in his chimney. You nod. Politely. Because, frankly, all 3 comparisons seem fair. The room sways slightly, or maybe you do, but you don't mind it anymore. The sway feels like a cradle. Like the world rocking you softly in its crooked arms. There's something timeless about this moment. Like you could blink and it would be 20 years later and you'd still be in this tavern. Still telling the same goat story, still waiting for the fire to burn bright again, and maybe that wouldn't be so bad. Maybe the point of everything is just this: the drink, the tale, the echo of laughter. The soft clink of tankards and the lull of shared stories. You feel someone beside you slump. Asleep, you tuck a cloak over their shoulders. The one-eyed captain is singing now. It's out of tune. Out of time. Out of key. But it's perfect. You hum along, you drink, you regret, you drink again, and somehow, in the blurry edges of the candlelight, it all becomes a story worth telling. A breeze sneaks in through the warped shutters, fluttering the flame of a lone candle and making the shadows dance across the stone walls. Someone's fallen asleep near the hearth, curled around a tankard like it's a warm cat. You think about joining them, but your legs are too busy enjoying the floor. You lean your head back and gaze at the beams overhead. Cobwebs cling to the corners. Smoke-stained wood groans gently as the wind shifts again. You think about all the places you could have ended up tonight. A cell. A ditch. A stranger's cart headed toward a border you can't spell. Instead, you're here. With stories and strangers and ale so strong it might dissolve your soul. And that's something, isn't it? You close your eyes for a second too long. Your thoughts swirl like wine in a jug, unsteady, but rich with something you can't quite name. A feeling. A knowing. Maybe it's just sleep, or maybe it's peace. Tomorrow, the hangover will come. And questions. And possibly another goat. But for now, there's this, a night well wasted. A story made of ruin and rhythm. You smile, and drink again. You awaken to silence. Not the tavern silence of hungover groans and sloshing tankards, but a solemn, cloistered stillness that wraps around you like wool. Your head pounds like it's hosting a miniature blacksmith convention just behind your eyes. Your tongue is dry, your limbs are lead, and your memories, Ah, those traders are foggier than a swamp at dawn. You try to sit up, everything protests. You manage to tilt your head instead, which reveals two things. First, you are no longer on a tavern floor. Second, a small nun is staring at you with the kind of patient concern usually reserved for dying birds and sinful vegetables. Ah, you croak. Hello. She says nothing. Just nods and presses a cup into your hands. It smells like boiled cabbage mixed with regret. You peer into it, then into her eyes. She is unmoved. You drink, it tastes worse than it smells, and it smells like feet in purgatory. But almost immediately, a strange warmth spreads through your chest, and your thoughts go from swamp mist to early morning dew, still thick, but clearer, where, you begin, then pause as your voice gives up. You try again. Where am I? The nun makes a small series of gestures with her hands. You blink, then she hands you a parchment. It reads, "You are safe. You arrived last night with a jar of fermented gooseberries and a goat. You claimed you wished to repent." You stare at the page, then at her. "I did what?" She holds up another note. "You offered to help brew herbal tonics for the sick. We accepted. Welcome to the convent of Saint Bertha the Bald." There is a pause, then she pats your shoulder, and walks away. You do not remember any of this. Your last memory was the tavern, firelight, shouting, that one-legged fiddler playing a song called The Bishop's Missing Trousers. Somewhere between your fourth mug and someone challenging you to a turnip balancing contest, everything became gloriously fuzzy. Apparently, you wandered off into the countryside with an animal companion and a deep need for redemption. You glance around. You are in a small stone chamber. Spare and tidy, with a narrow cot and a single wooden crucifix. There's a faint smell of rosemary and lavender in the air. The light filtering in through the shutters is soft and forgiving. You feel peaceful, also slightly ill. You rise carefully, pull on your boots, and shuffle into the corridor, where more nuns drift past like bees in black and white. Silent, swift, competent. One nods at you and hands you a bundle of herbs. Another points toward a cloistered doorway. You follow. You are put to work. It turns out, brewing monastic remedies is less about arcane incantations and more about chopping roots while someone silently judges your knife skills. You are given ginger, yarrow, fennel, licorice, and something called blessed thistle, which looks and smells like punishment in leaf form. The nuns work efficiently, moving from mortar to still to barrel with practiced grace. You, on the other hand, have already cut yourself twice and mistaken a tub of fermented barley mash for hair rinse, but you're trying. You pour. You measure. You grind. You whisper apologies to the dried flowers when you drop them. At one point, a nun gently corrects your method of stirring. You hadn't realized stirring could be incorrect. After a few hours, you are rewarded with a small wooden bowl of warm broth and a nod that might mean good job or don't touch anything else. You slurp it gratefully. It tastes faintly of anise and something almost minty. You are oddly proud of it. The vow of silence is starting to wear on you. You are, after all, someone who has spent a large portion of your life shouting over waves and arguing with customs officials about the definition of cargo. Being silent for hours feels like trying to breathe through a straw, so you begin to narrate in your head. You imagine you are the star of a very solemn play. Behold, you think, chopping ginger with increasing confidence, the tale of the repentant reveler. A journey from drunkenness to discipline. From gooseberry wine to godly work. The nun beside you sneezes. You smile. Maybe you're not half bad at this. Later that day, you are taken into the garden. It's walled, serene, and full of green things that smell like memories, sage and thyme and the peppery snap of nasturtiums. A tall nun in boots shows you how to pluck the good leaves without bruising them, how to tell wormwood from wild lettuce, and how to coax bees away from the mint if you talk to them gently. You like the garden. It's quiet, but not empty. There's a sense of purpose to the silence. Like the air is listening, you begin to feel something unnameable stir in your chest. Not guilt. Not shame. Something older. Something tender. Maybe it's just gas, maybe it's grace, hard to tell. That night, after a long day of holy horticulture and root-based alchemy, you are shown to your chamber once more. A candle waits for you, already lit, and beside it, a fresh set of linen and a tiny cake of lavender soap. You wash your hands, you sit on the edge of the cot. And for a long time, you just breathe. You're not used to stillness. Your life has been a series of scrambles, port to port, job to job, friend to stranger to lover to storm. But here, in this small, herb-scented room, you find yourself not missing the noise. You miss the people, yes, but not the chaos. You lie back, and you sleep. The next morning, a miracle happens. You awaken without pain. The tonic must have worked its strange, stinging magic, because your head feels clear, your limbs feel yours again, and your stomach no longer hates you. You even feel refreshed. This is unnerving. The nun from yesterday enters, gives you a short nod, and hands you another note. Would you like to stay a few more days? You blink at her, then at the clean sheets, the sunlight, the smell of warm herbs wafting in from the corridor. You nod, so you stay. 3 more days pass like dream breezes. You help in the garden. You grind herbs. You boil strange mixtures and ladle them into jars with names like stomach wind begone and nettle nerve relief. You become a regular at the still room. You learn how to make a proper compress, how to dry lemon balm, and how not to breathe in powdered valerian root unless you want to sneeze your soul out through your nose. You never speak, but somehow, you've never felt more heard. And then, just as you're beginning to suspect you might settle here forever, the silence is broken. Literally, one of the outer bells rings, not the meal's ready bell. The visitor bell, and into the courtyard strides a woman in a velvet riding cloak, boots that cost more than most houses, and a glare sharp enough to etch glass. You know her. You really, really wish you didn't. Lady Primrose Worthington, Grand Magistrate's sister. Owner of 3 horses, 2 terrible plays, and 1 deep grudge against you ever since you accidentally set fire to her picnic blanket during an overly enthusiastic poetry duel. She looks at you. She does not smile. The nuns do not seem fazed. They nod politely, listen to her clipped explanation about retrieving the misguided rake who absconded with a civic goat and made a scene at the county crossroads, and turn to you for confirmation. You want to say, it was not your goat. You want to say, you were seeking spiritual clarity. You want to say, isn't there a law about sanctuary? But instead, you just sigh and follow her out the gate, as the convent walls fade behind you and the road curves into the trees. You glance back once, you think of the silence, the garden, the strange peace that tasted faintly of fennel and forgiveness. You smile. Lady Worthington mistakes it for guilt and sniffs. But you know better. You didn't repent. You just remembered who you are beneath the noise. And now, you're ready to make noise again, preferably with a drink in hand, and maybe, just maybe, some dried thistle in your pocket. For later. You wake up to the sound of bells, not the shrill clang of church summons or the terrifying jingle of an approaching magistrate, but the slow, sonorous tolling of celebration. Somewhere close, a village is in the grips of festivity. You peel one eye open to the brightness of day and the general chaos of people moving in a collective state of anticipation. It's a wedding, or maybe a wake. Hard to tell at first glance. Either way, you're pulled upright by an enthusiastic stranger who announces with great flourish that you're just in time to bless the union, which either means 2 people are marrying or someone is being married to the dirt. A win either way. You stumble into the crowd, where flower crowns sit askew on children's heads and dogs roam with ribbons tied to their tails. The bride, or possibly the chief mourner, is radiant and red-faced, possibly from joy, possibly from drink. Her corset is a marvel of medieval engineering, and you briefly consider whether it might actually be responsible for the current wine shortage in the region. You're handed a cup. You don't ask what's in it. You just drink, because that's what you do, apparently, at wakes and weddings and anything that requires a roast boar and 3 separate jugs of something called peasant's blush. Somewhere between the cheese course and the drunken choir forming in the hayloft, you find yourself seated next to a man who claims to have married 5 sisters. Not all at once, he adds with a wink, then belches into his sleeve. Though they might say different. You smile politely and pour yourself more of whatever has dyed your lips a suspicious plum color. A boy slides beneath the table, chasing a chicken. No one bats an eye. A woman stands on a bench and begins reciting verses so profoundly inappropriate they could curdle butter. The old women cheer. The men toast. You realize, not for the first time, that social gatherings in this century are less about occasion and more about collective escapism. Weddings are excuses for unbuttoned tunics. Wakes are reasons to tell risque stories. Baptisms come with brandy. Harvests mean mead. Even fast days are often slow if you know which friar to bribe. There is no part of the calendar that doesn't involve drinking. You try to ask someone what the actual event is today, but the answer is drowned out by a small marching band of drunken cousins. As the sun tilts westward, the party changes flavor. Children are carted off or left asleep under tables. The cheese runs out. The dancing becomes more of a swaying ritual performed by sweaty, determined adults gripping each other like life rafts. Someone plays a fiddle. Or attempts to. You're pulled into the rhythm by a woman with elbows sharper than her wit. She insists you know the steps to a dance she calls the spinning goose, which seems to involve a lot of stomping and yelling the word left. At random intervals, you do your best. There's a rhythm to it, even if the meaning escapes you. A sort of chaotic joy. The kind of joy that feels ancient, older than etiquette, older than weddings, even older than wine, the joy of humans gathered in warmth, with food and drink and just enough reason to forget everything else. Later, much later, the event takes a turn. It always does, doesn't it? Maybe it's the moment when the barrel runs dry. Or when the singing gets too loud. Or when Uncle Theobald falls into the fire pit for the third time. Whatever the cause, a tension settles. The kind you can smell before you see. A bitterness that arrives after too much sweetness. You watch as an argument unfolds over a spilled drink. Voices rise. A slap is thrown. The crowd shifts like a flock of startled birds. People intervene, or pretend not to notice. Someone yells something about a goat. Someone else produces a mandolin like it's a weapon. You inch back, cup clutched to your chest, wondering if this is part of the ceremony. Eventually, it fizzles, the way everything does when there's no stamina left for fury. The fighters fall into each other's arms, declaring eternal brotherhood. A toast is made to our noble shared idiocy. A new barrel is tapped, the party limps forward, you sit back down and sip something new. It's cloudy. Possibly medicinal. Definitely fermented, and through it all, the fire burns steady. Much later, you find yourself in a barn. Don't ask how. You're surrounded by the snores of partygoers and the occasional grunt of livestock. Someone is sleeping in a wheelbarrow. Someone else is curled beside a cow. There's a girl snoring into a bouquet of wild onions. A lute lies broken in the corner like a sad, defeated soul. You think of all the formal events you were warned about. The etiquette scrolls. The rules about sleeves and shoes and where not to put your goblet. And yet, here, in this barn of breath and booze and hay, you feel like you've truly attended something sacred, not because of what was said, but because of what was shared: time, warmth, wine, and a collective willingness to be utterly ridiculous, together. A soft snore beside you makes you smile. Someone's foot is resting gently on your shoulder. You don't even mind. You feel wrapped in something bigger than a party, a ritual of imperfection, performed not with reverence, but with volume. Your stomach aches, your throat is dry, and your head swims, but your heart feels oddly full. Tomorrow will be another journey. Possibly to a bathhouse. Possibly to a gibbet. Hard to say, but tonight, here in the hay, surrounded by laughter and the lingering scent of roasted garlic, you found a strange and tipsy peace, and as your eyes close, you swear you hear someone begin another toast in the distance. Something about pickled eels and second chances. You raise your invisible cup, smile in your sleep, and whisper, to both. You wake up on a pile of barley. This is not entirely unexpected. What is unexpected is the small man in a fur-trimmed cap shouting at you in Middle English about grain quotas and theft of spirits. You try to sit up. He pokes you with a ledger. That's right, you've somehow stumbled into the lair of the Brewers Guild, and they're not amused. Your hands smell like hops. Your tunic is crusted with yeast. There is malt in your ears, and one boot is mysteriously tied to a cask labeled "Do Not Touch" under penalty of cursing. You've had better mornings. The brewer himself, Master Godwin, eventually calls off his apprentice and invites you to sit. He eyes you with the weariness of a man who has spent his life chasing barley through bureaucracy. He pours you a mug of something dark and bitter, then informs you that this particular brew has been legally weighed, taxed, recorded, tasted, blessed, and certified by both the guild and the church. You take a sip. It tastes like law. Turns out, brewing isn't just a pastime in your era, it's an ordeal. Every village, town, and city is crawling with regulations. Only certain people may brew. Only under certain conditions. With specific measurements, ingredients, and moral fiber, there are fines for weak ale. Fines for strong ale, fines for pretending your ale is stronger than it is, fines for brewing on holy days, or with impure water, or without a stamp from the bishop's cousin. You listen in disbelief as Godwin explains the great ale scandal of 1374, when 6 women were pilloried for secretly watering down their wares and replacing the hops with hedge blossoms. One of them, legend says, still haunts the brewing yard, whispering bad recipes into fresh barrels. You stare at your drink a little longer, then put it down. The brewer's wife enters shortly after. Her name is Marjorie, and she has forearms that could beat flour into fear. She smells like rye and responsibility. She glares at you, possibly because you've been sleeping in her grain, possibly because you've been drinking unlicensed ale from the next parish over. Godwin gives her a look, and she disappears, muttering something about freeloaders with fancy boots. You check your boots, only one is yours. You don't ask. Marjorie, as it turns out, is a brewer too. In fact, most brewers are women, at least at the local level. They brew for households, inns, and neighbors. They're called aluives. And they carry more power than you'd expect in a world where women can't inherit land but can ruin you with a sour batch and a well-placed rumor. Aluives are feared, admired, and often accused of witchcraft, not always in that order. You watch as Marjorie measures out herbs with the precision of an apothecary and mutters her own blessings into the vat, something about warding off rats and priests. The brewing fire glows under the copper pan. A sticky heat clings to everything. It smells like damp bread and ambition. You ask how much she can brew in a day. She laughs, wipes her hands on her apron, and says, "Enough to make my neighbors honest, and my enemies louder." You nod. You don't quite know what that means, but it sounds like something a very powerful person would say. Later, you're sent to the market with a cart of sealed jugs and a bell to announce the batch. It's a precarious journey, both because the wheel is loose and because the last time Marjorie let someone else sell for her, they returned with fewer teeth and more enemies, so you shout like you've been trained. Marjorie's best, dark, thick, legal. People gather, sniffing the air like curious foxes. You hand out samples. Coins clink. Praise flows. A man calls it the stuff dreams are made of. A man calls it the stuff dreams are made of. Another says it reminds him of his grandmother's hugs. You don't ask, but not everyone is pleased. From across the square comes the distinct sound of disdain. The local church deacon. He waddles up like a storm in soft shoes, robes billowing, brow furrowed. He demands to know if the batch was brewed in accordance with the feast day regulations, if the water came from the sacred well, and if Marjorie has paid her penance for the last time she told the abbess to boil her own vows. You stammer. The deacon scoffs. He grabs a jug and sniffs it with exaggerated skepticism, then drinks again, then wanders off muttering about divine exceptions. You return victorious. Marjorie says nothing. Just claps you once on the shoulder and shoves a bowl of barley stew into your hands. Godwin nods, already burying his nose in the next ledger. You sit by the fire, listening to the gentle hiss of fermenting pride, but your peace is short-lived. There's a knock on the door. Sharp. Rhythmic, the guild inspector. You're about to run when Marjorie grabs your sleeve. Let him in, she says. He's overdue. A man with eyebrows like angry hedgehogs enters. He inspects everything, the water source, the brewing logs, the ladle's length, the cat, whose sole purpose is vermin control, but whom you suspect is also emotionally blackmailing everyone for treats. The inspector finally samples the ale, he swishes, he spits, he pauses, and declares, acceptable. Marjorie beams like a queen. That evening, the guild holds a small ceremony for the brewers who passed inspection. There's bread. There's song. There's more ale. You try to keep up, but your tongue feels like it's wrapped in velvet and your thoughts are taking turns without you. Still, you learn things. You learn that ale is safer than water, and therefore brewed constantly, even for children. You learn that brewing is one of the few trades where women can gain wealth and respect. If they survive the taxes, the gossip, and the occasional explosion, you learn that guilds are both protection and prison. They offer safety, but only if you follow every rule, pay every due, and never, ever cross someone with more parchment than you. You learn that Marjorie once brewed an ale so strong it collapsed a bishop, and that she was fined, but also applauded, and that she still keeps the bishop's ring as a bottle stopper. You stumble home, or rather, you're placed in a wheelbarrow and pushed by a child who's definitely too excited to be near open flames, as the stars spin gently above you and the cart rattles over cobblestones. You think about how drinking in this world isn't just a pastime, it's survival, it's craft, it's identity. Every cup you raise is the result of dozens of hands, farmers, maltsters, brewers, taxmen, and probably a few grudges baked into the grain. You'll never drink without thinking of it again, probably because your liver is now an active crime scene. You arrive back at your current lodgings, a hayloft with aspirations of being a hostel, and collapse into sleep just as the bells begin to toll again. You dream of alueves dancing on rooftops, of guilds ruled by cats, of jugs that whisper secrets when tipped just right, and somewhere, in the dream's corner, a bishop slurs an apology to a barley loaf while Marjorie sharpens her cleaver and says, "Next batch'll be better." You believe her, you always will. Your head is still throbbing like a cathedral bell caught in a thunderstorm. It's late morning, or maybe early afternoon. Time has grown stretchy again, and you've ended up barefoot in the corner of some herb seller's cluttered stall, squinting at a phial of suspiciously wiggling liquid. The vendor's beard is long, his knowledge longer, and his patience, well, that's thinning by the second. You explain that your liver has declared mutiny and that something, anything, needs to be done before you perish dramatically into a barrel of pickled eel heads. He strokes his beard and suggests you try a which bottle. You repeat, eye twitching slightly, yes, he says, as if it's the most obvious solution in the world. For protection. And, sometimes indigestion. He gathers up a cracked ceramic flask, a smidge of salt, a bent nail, and something that looks alarmingly like a toenail clipping. You try to stop him, but he waves you off, counter magic for foul humors. Standard stuff. You're not sure if he's healing your hangover or exorcising it, but you're in no shape to argue. He throws in a pinch of rosemary and mutters a chant that includes the word flatulence 3 times. You're handed the bottle and told to bury it under a crossroad or boil it near a sleeping cat. You choose the latter, mostly because there's a sleepy cat nearby and you've no idea where crossroads go when they're drunk. The concoction hisses like a vengeful toad. The cat barely stirs, you sip it anyway, instant regret, your mouth tastes like iron and leaf mold. But your headache recedes slightly, and the vertigo slows to a gentle wobble. Encouraged, you begin crafting your own cure, using whatever's left on the tavern shelf, dried sage, a slug of mead, pickled pear juice, powdered ginger root, and 2 spoonfuls of mustard. Because no one was watching, a small crowd gathers as you mutter incantations. Please, dear liver, hold the line. Toss in a handful of crushed walnuts for spiritual balance. You seal it all in a clay jug, whisper a solemn hocus pocus, and hold your breath. The jug explodes. It doesn't shatter, it detonates, sending herbs, ceramic shards, and what may have once been a beetle across the room. A smoldering smell of spicy despair lingers in the air. The tavern keeper blinks slowly at you. The cat finally wakes up and flees. You smile weakly. You're not banned from the tavern, but you're definitely placed on a watch list. Word spreads. Suddenly, everyone wants your cure, not to drink it, but to watch what happens next. You become a sideshow. A walking, brewing, semi-magical explosion hazard. People toss you coins just to see if you'll set fire to a turnip again. One merchant offers you a spot in his traveling fair. You decline, of course. You're not a charlatan, you're an artist, a hangover alchemist. That night, you try a gentler brew. Mint, boiled barley, spring water left under the moon, and a single apple pip. It tastes like boiled socks. But no smoke. No flame. No loss of eyebrows, progress. Still, you miss the chaotic thrill. So you sneak back to the herb cellar the next morning with soot-stained sleeves and a coin pilfered from your boot. He takes one look at you and sighs. What's the ailment this time? You scratch your head. Existential ache. He nods solemnly and hands you a jar filled with what looks like pickled lichen and optimism. You drink it, you hallucinate a conversation with a fence post, but you feel better. The fence post was very affirming. By the third brew, you've mastered a technique. Boil the herbs slowly, never stir counterclockwise, lest your fate unravel, and whisper compliments to the pot. Apparently, even cauldrons need validation. Your newest blend, dubbed Morning Mercy, gains local fame for reducing headache, heartache, and mildly insulting hiccups. Folk begin showing up with their own ailments. A mason with twisted knees. A widow with heartburn and heartbreak. A bard whose lute keeps catching fire. You give them all Morning Mercy, and while you're not sure it helps, it gives them something to believe in, a belief stronger than hops or honey wine. And in the corner, watching with narrowed eyes, is your old friend the magistrate, the very same who once threatened to brand you for public indecency and unauthorized goat summoning. He seems intrigued. Not impressed, mind you. Just curious enough to not arrest you again, yet, he calls you aside, one late evening, and asks if your concoctions can calm tempers. There's a brawl every night at the docks. He says. Can you do something about it? You mix up a batch of peaceful porter, a brew thick with chamomile, wild rose petals, and enough opium poppy to silence a troubadour mid-ballad. You deliver it in wooden jugs shaped like sheep, and the docks fall eerily quiet for a whole week. The magistrate nods once and doubles your coin. Now you're not just a brewer, you're municipal infrastructure, and you still can't remember last Tuesday. One day, you're invited to a manor house to consult on a noblewoman's persistent dream of drowning in cider. You nod wisely, diagnose her with imaginative humors, and mix her a tea made from cherry stems and dried clover. She insists on paying you in peacocks. You accept. You now have 3 confused peacocks and 0 knowledge on how to care for them. But they follow you everywhere, which somehow enhances your mystical credibility. Children call you Madam Bubble. Old men bow to you in the street, tavern keepers invite you to name their drinks, even the cats have stopped hissing. Your latest creation, Brain Blanket, becomes an overnight sensation. You swear it's just elderflower and burnt toast crumbs, but people claim it cures bad dreams and receding hairlines. One soldier drinks it and says he finally stopped seeing ghosts. Another swears it helped him forget his debts and dance again. You're not sure which part worked, but it worked, and still, there's a small, simmering part of you that wonders if this is just another kind of drunkenness. A new illusion. A softer one. Less sharp around the edges, but isn't that what you needed, to drift into another version of yourself, a calmer one? A kinder one. Still wild, but less prone to duels and sterile-related injuries. You think of that first terrible bottle, the witch's brew, the strange rituals, the accidental explosions. How something so absurd gave birth to something so healing. You never planned to become a folk hero, or a mystic, or a wandering brewer of souls. But here you are, drunk on gratitude, hungover from old mistakes, bubbling with whatever comes next. It's nearly dusk, and the distant bell of the abbey tolls 7 slow chimes, though the sound is smothered by the jubilant roar coming from the hilltop ahead. You trudge onward, your boots squelching with a mixture of vineyard mud and bread pudding someone spilled back in the last village. A festival, they said. A holy event, they promised. A local rite of renewal to honor Saint Emmerin, patron of winemakers, bakers, and improbably, unexpected twins, it is. Significantly less sacred than advertised, the festival sprawls across the slope like a particularly festive barn fire, full of color and chaos and questionable decisions. There's a maypole tangled with ribbons, a lopsided puppet show on a beer wagon, and a choir of monks in varying degrees of inebriation attempting a madrigal about cheese. Someone has set up a shrine made entirely of spent grape stems and broken chalices. A goose in a velvet bonnet patrols the edge of the chaos with bureaucratic menace, and you? You are not dressed for this, you're still wearing that slightly damp chemise from last night's storm nap under a cider cart, and your boots have been gnawed by a goat. But as you step closer to the clamor, no one bats an eye. Everyone is too busy drinking, singing, tumbling, and collapsing in devotional joy around kegs the size of oxen. There's no entry fee, just an offering. You give them your last hard biscuit and a wink. And the stewards usher you in with a garland of thyme and an earthenware cup already half full of something crimson and fizzing, blessings of the barrel. A nun shrieks at you with wild eyes. She smells like elderflower mead and roasted turnips. Drink before the twins arrive. You won't want to remember them sober. You nod solemnly and sip. It tastes like laughter, cloves, and very poor impulse control. The first stage of the festival is the blessing of the yeast. A solemn affair, allegedly. There's a wooden stage set up with relics from miraculous batches of wine, a cork that once bounced through a bishop's window, a jug that poured for 7 hours before exploding from divine pressure, a spoon stolen from a saint's tavern bowl. A friar in velvet robes reads from the holy scroll of fermentation, which mostly contains poetic descriptions of bubbles and 4 different blessings for barrels. Every so often, the crowd shouts "Let it rise!" and flings stale buns at passing merchants. It's more liturgical than you expected. You find yourself swept along a crooked aisle of drink booths, where each stop is more questionable than the last. There's mushroom ale brewed by a local wizard who swears it doesn't always talk back. There's pink gin laced with pepper and beetroot, served by a man in a tinfoil crown who insists he used to be a pigeon. And there's a wine so dark and dense it stains your lips like ink, and possibly your memories too. You pass a group of scholars arguing about whether you can get drunk from inhaling bread. You pass a bard playing a harp made of rib bones. You pass a bucket labeled Lost Ideas that's already half full of scribbled notes, forgotten promises, and one baby shoe. You're no longer sure if you're walking or floating. At the foot of the maypole, a troupe of barefoot dancers spin in loops, their feet slapping the grass in time to a drum beat played on someone's overturned pickling vat. You try to join in but trip over your own laughter and land in a pile of apprentices who are debating the metaphysical ethics of drinking during fasting season. One of them hands you a thimble of something they call celestial gooseberry rum, and the world melts a little around the edges. Night falls without warning, the sky turns purple. The lanterns are lit, bobbing between tents like fireflies made of tallow and good intentions. Someone lights a bonfire using only a magnifying glass and a priest's glare. The fermentation choir begins their ballads, tragic songs of grapes that died young, of beers gone sour, of monks who forgot to label the barrels and accidentally blessed vinegar. Everyone sways together. It feels like the whole hillside is breathing. You sit beside a fountain made of old cider barrels and watch a line of nobles try to remember how chairs work. Their finery is smudged with berry stains and roast goose grease, and one of them is using a heraldic banner as a picnic rug. A duchess in one boot is attempting to compose a sonnet to the tavern girl who served her nettle gin. Her rhymes are terrible but deeply heartfelt. Nearby, a goat chews serenely on a ceremonial flag. You lean back against the cider barrel fountain and stare up at the stars. They don't twinkle so much as wobble. Maybe it's the drink. Or maybe it's the sheer density of joy all around you. Here, the highborn and the low, the cloistered and the chaotic, all mingle with the same flushed cheeks and slurred benedictions. You've seen a knight cry into his soup and a nun confess to kissing a brewer under a pear tree. There is no shame, only stories, and spilled wine, so much spilled wine. At some point, the twins arrive. You don't know what the nun meant earlier, but now you understand. They're acrobats, or possibly minor demons, who arrive in a cart shaped like a corkscrew. Somersault out of it, and begin pouring liquid fire into everyone's cups while reciting riddles. One of them juggles flasks while the other blindfolds himself and navigates the crowd by sniffing out regret. They pour something into your mug that smells like cinnamon and childhood fears. You drink it. You shouldn't have. Time bends. Or maybe unbuttons. Suddenly you're on stage. Or a roof. Or in a large boot. Someone hands you a crown made of bottle corks. Another person is painting a grape on your cheek. The choir is chanting your name, or something close to it, and a young woman in feathers declares you the spirit of the ferment. This might be an honor. Or a curse. Or both. You give a short speech about the divine purpose of yeast, which includes the phrase "let thy sugars sing," and are rewarded with 3 kisses, 2 figs, and a pair of socks that do not belong to you. Eventually, the bonfire dims, the dancers rest. The jugglers sleep. Even the goose has curled up in a pile of stolen hats. You find yourself sitting beside the fountain again, your cup finally empty, your limbs full of warmth and your heart oddly light. Across from you, a tired monk raises his mug and nods. To the ferment, he says hoarsely. You clink cups, and in the soft hush of the sleeping festival, you feel something profound ripple through you, not just the drink, but the sense that here, for one wild night, the world rewrote its rules. Here, the sacred and the silly danced hand in hand. And you got to be part of it, and tomorrow, you'll wake up with twigs in your hair, an owl perched on your ankle, and the lingering taste of elderberry moonshine in your mouth. But tonight, you sleep beneath the stars of the vineyard hill, wrapped in someone's discarded cloak, dreaming of laughter and leavening and the very first barrel that ever dared to bubble. The bottle arrives like a dare. It's thin, green, and glinting in the lamplight like something pulled from a wizard's cabinet, or a very small pond filled with secrets. You stare at it while the tavern hushes into a more focused kind of mischief, and somewhere between your 6th cup of whatever that was and your 4th dance with someone named either Mags or Max, the absinthe appears before you like a snake in a satin slipper. No label. No cork. Just a lazy swirl of liquid that smells faintly of anise and moonlight. You reach for it with hands that still remember bread but have forgotten utensils. The tavern owner says something you don't understand. It might be a warning. Or a recipe. Or a hymn. You nod solemnly. You don't want to be rude. And besides, you've come this far. Why start understanding things now? The absinthe is poured into a tiny glass shaped like a thimble for gods. A slotted spoon is balanced on top. A sugar cube is placed, then baptized with more absinthe. Then comes fire, blue and elegant. It hisses as it burns, turning the sugar into syrup. The cube collapses slowly, like a priest fainting mid-sermon. Drops of caramelized alchemy fall into the glass. When it's time, they douse the flame and pour cool water in a thin stream. The emerald turns cloudy, blooming into a fog that looks like regret wrapped in lace. You drink, it's sharp. It's sweet. It's soft. It tastes like the inside of a pipe organ and the memory of fennel. It's not just a drink, it's a key. A doorway. A promise that something is about to change, and not necessarily in a way that favors your sense of direction. The floor grows thoughtful under your feet, you try to stand, but your limbs negotiate something entirely different. You take one step forward and gently kiss the edge of a table leg with your shin. It feels like a polite duel with the furniture. You bow in apology. The table forgives you. The room tilts, slightly, not enough to throw you, just enough to make the candlelight blur into halos. You walk, sort of, past shadows that are whispering now. You can hear your own heartbeat humming a sea shanty. Someone hands you a scarf, or perhaps it's a chicken. You drape it gallantly around your shoulders. Either way, the music has changed, the tavern band is playing something slower now. Not because they've changed songs, but because you've slowed time itself. You're almost certain of it. The fiddle pulls like honey, and the drumbeat drips like candle wax. You begin to move, not dance, exactly. More like a sway learned from clouds or drifting ships. Someone joins you. Or maybe several someones. Or maybe you've split in two. You're not sure. You've lost track of how many legs you came in with. It doesn't matter, you feel light. As though you've uncorked the part of you that carries worry. Your thoughts are no longer stacked like firewood. They tumble, glittering, into piles of silk and clover. You don't know what time it is. You don't care. Time has always been suspicious, with its rules and its lines and its clocks. You much prefer this version, soft-edged, warm, looped like ribbon. Someone laughs near your ear. You turn and see a face blurred by joy. They say something that might be your name, or a song lyric, or a warning. You laugh, too. You both lean back and let the ceiling spin above you like a painted wheel of stars. You think, this must be what it's like to be a ghost. Not the sad kind. The free kind. The kind that flits between dreams and drinks and doesn't worry about stairs or taxes. Then you think, this is either the best night of your life or the first act of a fairy tale with consequences. You drink again, now you're outside. You don't remember walking out, but the stars are too sharp to be a ceiling, and the air is crisp enough to be real. The tavern door is somewhere behind you, still humming with light and distant laughter. Before you is a field. Or a dock. Or the edge of something important. You begin to walk. Your boots make a sound like sleepy applause on the dirt. The bottle is in your hand again. Of course it is. The absinthe tastes stronger out here. Wilder. The wormwood sings a deeper note, like a bell struck beneath the skin. You feel your senses stretching, upward, outward, backward through your own memory. You remember the first time you tried honey. The smell of your grandmother's soap. The way you once mispronounced catapult and never heard the end of it. You also remember falling, not literally. Not yet. But emotionally, yes. You've fallen for the sky. For the way shadows stretch. For the taste of danger that kisses the rim of your glass. For the absurd, miraculous fact that you, someone with a questionable past and an even more questionable bar tab, have become the center of a very strange and beautiful universe. You sit on the ground and pour one last measure. The earth tilts again, but this time it feels like an embrace. You don't know how long you stay there, long enough for the cold to creep in around the hem of your coat. Long enough for the absinthe to pull back its lace curtain and leave you with the kind of clarity usually reserved for saints or sleepwalkers. Long enough for a small beetle to crawl across your boot like it's climbing a mountain. Eventually, you return. Someone leads you back inside. The tavern has dimmed, softened. The chaos has become calm. A few figures doze in corners. A mop rests near a bucket, waiting for morning. The fire has become embers. You follow the glow and find your coat, or what you think is your coat, and collapse beside it. Absent doesn't let go gently. It releases you in pieces. 1 minute you're humming a lullaby your mother never sang. The next, you're weeping quietly for reasons that feel important but remain unnamed. Then you're laughing. Then you're asleep, and in that sleep, oh, what dreams, you soar. You become a falcon with a tankard. A tree with shoes. A song that forgets its ending. You live 10 lives and lose none of them. You dance with stars. You sip from moons. You argue gently with the wind and win. When you finally wake, it's to the sound of a broom and the faint, cruel light of dawn. Your head feels like a cathedral collapsed inside it. Your mouth tastes like history. You find the bottle beside you, empty, naturally. But there's a single sugar cube beside it. A gift. Or a warning. Or an invitation. You pocket it. You smile. You limp toward the smell of frying onions and black bread, because even after a night like this, especially after a night like this, you know that what comes next is just as strange, just as absurd, and just as likely to end with you holding a drink you can't pronounce beside someone you'll never forget. By now, you've developed a certain rhythm to your disheveled, tipsy survival. It goes like this: wake up somewhere unexpected, on a roof, in a priest's apothecary closet, or occasionally in a washtub full of linen that may or may not be clean. Spend the first hour regretting everything. Spend the second rehydrating with a concoction of herbs, beer, and raw egg. By the third hour, you're chasing after your own footprints trying to piece together what you promised the night before, and then there's the chicken. It began 3 days ago. You woke up in a crumbling outbuilding with straw in your hair and a chicken sitting firmly on your chest, clucking with a deep, almost judgmental rhythm. You tried to shake it. Bribe it. Beg it. It just followed you, as if it had recognized something in you, something no one else had, a kinship. It is, without doubt, the most loyal thing in your life at the moment. You name it Frère Jean, in honor of the monk who tried to exorcise your hiccups once by hitting you with a relic, but today is different. Today, as you nurse your third tankard of something called Whisperberry Truth Water, which seems to do the exact opposite, you are handed a letter. Sealed in green wax, and addressed not to your alias of the week, but your actual name. You blink. You haven't heard your full name in ages. It has weight to it, like a cask of guilt rolling down a hill. You open the letter slowly. The contents are short, and terrifyingly clear. You are hereby summoned to the estate of Lady Eleanor du Fronsac, under matters concerning the clandestine assembly at the Broken Scepter Tavern on the 14th of July. Appear, or be considered a fugitive of the crown. Come sober. E.F. You reread the letter 3 times. The ink doesn't change. The implication does, because you remember the broken scepter, barely. It was the night with the accordion, the vinegar toast, and that fellow in the velvet mask who claimed to be a royal cousin, a goat herder, and a spy, all in one sentence. There was talk of rebellion. Or it might have been cheese tariffs. But there were maps. And pledges. And, most dangerously, witnesses. You groan and look to Frère Jean. He stares back. You're going to need your good boots. 2 days later, you're trudging up the gravel path to the Fronsac estate, which is really more of a manor disguised as a fortress. Turrets lean outward like they're eavesdropping on your incoming doom. The guards at the gate give you a once-over and clearly decide you're too hungover to be a real threat. They let you in. Inside, you're greeted by a steward with a nose sharp enough to pierce chainmail. He leads you through a hall that smells like tax documents and aristocratic disappointment. Then, Lady Eleanor. She's tall, draped in velvet so dark it seems to absorb candlelight, and she has the air of someone who could kill you with nothing but a disappointing sigh. She doesn't offer a chair. You remember nothing, do you? She asks. You try a smile. That depends. Am I supposed to? She does not laugh. I had half a mind to have you detained, she says. But you're useful. You're stupid, and unpredictable, and those are traits my current roster of advisors lack. You are about to feel insulted. But then she hands you a map. A real one this time. Inked with careful circles and strange annotations, you've wandered more corners of this kingdom than most smugglers, she says. I want your memory. Your patterns. You don't realize it, but you've stumbled into 4 separate rebel gatherings, and twice you were mistaken for a courier. You're a walking intelligence leak. You open your mouth. Close it. Open it again. So I'm valuable? She snorts. You're like a goat that keeps accidentally kicking open locked doors. I want to see where you wander next. You're not sure if this is an alliance or a hostage negotiation, but she gives you wine. Strong, bitter, and laced with hints of plum. Drink, she commands. You'll need it. I'm sending you to the coast. And so you ride, still slightly trembling, still unsure if you've been recruited or blackmailed, along narrow roads toward the sea, where a storm is said to be brewing in more ways than one. The taverns along the way whisper of blockade runners, drunken monks with coded hymns, and a baker's guild that is secretly smuggling arms and baguettes. You listen. You drink. You dance with a one-eyed harpist who insists on calling you your grace even after you insist you are, in fact, very much not noble, and through it all, Frere Jean follows. At one village, a child tries to take him. He pecks the boy and returns to your shoulder. You've stopped questioning it. He's your shadow now. On the 3rd night, you end up at a coastal inn that has a chimney taller than the building itself and a sign with a fish that looks more like a drunk eel. You collapse into a chair, order something called Stormblight Lager, and start mapping out the places you've been, trying to make sense of Lady Eleanor's obsession. It's only then, under candlelight and mild alcohol-induced vertigo, that you see it, the pattern, the places you've stumbled into form a shape. Not a clear one, but a loop. A thread. Someone, or something, has been pulling strings, and you've been dancing like a fool in a puppet show you didn't know you were in. Your mug shakes slightly in your hand. Frere Jean clucks. You smile, bitterly. Well, you whisper, I suppose we go back in. Because the thing about drinking your way through politics is that sooner or later, someone will take you seriously, and when they do, the real hangover begins. You wake up, or rather, something inside you attempts the noble act of waking, while your body remains stubbornly committed to the floor. There's a throb behind your eyes, an orchestra of regret pounding its drums somewhere inside your skull. You try opening one eye. The world tilts. You close it again. You groan, someone is snoring beside you, no idea who. They're wearing what might once have been a velvet doublet and what is now just a smear of wine and breadcrumbs. A boot is perched on the windowsill. Yours? Hard to say. There's a faint smell of garlic, goat, and guilt. A small child tiptoes across the tavern floor with a mop and bucket, giving your collapsed form a brief look of pity before continuing on. A dog, tail wagging gently, licks your elbow. You survived the night, barely. You try again. Sitting up is like scaling a cathedral in full armor, but eventually, you manage. There's a puddle of ale soaking your hem, a slice of turnip in your lap, and a mysterious feather tucked into your bodice. Victory. You take in the room. It's daylight. That strange, cloudy medieval daylight where nothing's quite white, and everything is the color of old bread. People are waking all around you, some with song, some with swears, all with that stunned expression that says, "What in God's name did I drink last night?" You remember fragments. A lute solo. A toast to a knight who wasn't there. Someone crying because their cat ran off with a monk. You remember dancing with a barrel, betting your boot on a riddle, and maybe, just maybe, dueling someone with a spoon. A normal night, really. You shuffle toward the tavern door, limbs aching, dignity long lost. Outside, the street smells of horses, heathfire, and regret. Sunlight touches your face, and the wind tells you you're still alive. Congratulations, you did it. You got wasted in medieval times. And unlike many before you, you've lived to feel awful about it. You find a fountain, one of those moss-covered public ones, half shaded by a leaning chapel wall. A nun eyes you suspiciously as you lean over and splash your face. The water is freezing. You gasp. You take a sip. A bird watches you from a nearby windowsill with judgment in its little beady eyes. You sit. Just for a moment, because now comes the reckoning. Not from a priest, not from the magistrate, not from the gods you may or may not have offended last night, but from your own liver. It rumbles. Your stomach flips. Your head feels like it was kicked by an ox and then insulted by a poet. Still, you have something they can't take from you, experience, and the memory of a night made of firelight, foolishness, and fermented fun. A kindly baker's apprentice offers you a heel of bread from a basket. You take it. It's slightly burnt, but so are you. He tells you the market's open, and there's a new juggler on the square today. A woman in a cart offers pickle juice for what ails you. You politely decline. You see an old friend, someone from the tavern, though you can't recall their name. You share a look, the look of co-conspirators. They raise two fingers in a peace sign, and you do the same. Medieval solidarity. You wander through the town, everywhere you look. People are trying to undo the damage of joy. A merchant's apprentice vomits behind a crate. A knight limps down an alley with only one spur. A woman yells at a chicken, probably for reasons that made perfect sense a few hours ago. It's all strangely beautiful. There's no shame here, just the universal truth that everyone, at some point, will get gloriously, historically, magnificently drunk, and the morning after. That's when the real stories begin. You pass a church where someone's praying loudly for forgiveness. You pass a hay wagon where someone's still asleep, face planted in straw. You pass a goat. Just standing there. Probably judging you. You find your way back to your lodgings, which are more of a glorified broom closet above a weaver's workshop. The stairs creak as you climb. Your bed is lumpy and smells faintly of time and disappointment. You collapse into it, shoes and all. Outside, the bells ring the hour. Probably noon. Maybe not. Time's strange in the aftermath of celebration. Everything's either too slow or far too fast. You curl into yourself, and the quiet settles in, not silence exactly, but peace. The kind that comes when the chaos has burned itself out and you've made it to the other side. You survived a medieval bender, and the world kept turning. Later that evening, you'll sip some broth and swear off alcohol forever. You'll say things like never again and why did I challenge a monk to arm wrestling. But give it time, because one night, perhaps not so far from now, you'll hear music spilling from a tavern window. You'll catch the scent of roasted onions and wood smoke. Someone will laugh. Someone will sing, and your feet, your treacherous, hopeful feet, will turn toward the door, because deep down, you know, getting wasted in the Middle Ages wasn't just a way to forget the bad, it was a way to remember the good, the shared foolishness. The stolen dances. The absurdity of living in a world where leeches are medicine and shoes are optional, and if you're lucky, if the stars align and your coin purse isn't empty, you might just find your way back to that same tavern, where the drinks are strong, the songs are worse, and the memories are waiting to be made all over again. You've reached the end of your medieval misadventure, and somehow, through cider and chaos, through trials and tankards, through goats, ghosts, and questionable decisions, you made it. Your story's now part of the great ale-stained tapestry of history. So that's how it was, wasn't it? Your life, spun like linen from the flax of farce and luck and drink. You danced through muddy lanes and judgment halls, staggered from one tumbled barrel to the next, cradling bottles like sacred relics, collecting friendships like bruises, and somehow, you kept waking up. Not always in the same town. Not always with your own socks. But always alive. Always moving, and isn't that a kind of victory? the world never made it easy for someone like you. Not with your clever tongue, your stained corset, your appetite for trouble and wine and things not meant to be touched. But you kept laughing. You kept stealing moments no one else would dare to claim. You loved poorly but fully. You lost coins and gained stories. You made strangers sing and statues blush. You carved joy out of rotten wood, and when they said you were foolish, when they said you were wild or wasted or doomed, you just smiled, because they were right. And you liked it that way. Now the candle's low. The streets outside have quieted, and the last tavern dog has curled into sleep. You can rest now, finally. You've earned it. Close your eyes, and let the world drift away, one clumsy, glorious adventure at a time. Good night.